All right, what's happening? It's your boy Rico from Street Scores, and man, oh man, what an exciting day to cover some Commanders off-season football. Of course, today was the first day of joint practices with the Baltimore Ravens up in Baltimore. Man, we got to break down everything that happened. Of course, it's Rico Street Scores, so we're going to go position group by position group, starting with the coaches. I'm going to give y'all a big injury update, quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, all the way down to the DBs, everything. And of course, I'm gonna do like a full breakdown of the fights, like what started them, what happened, who ended them, because apparently it seems like there were like 3 or 4 different situations that happened. Most people are only talking about like the 2 major ones, most notably Mark Andrews body slamming Danny Johnson, which made me lose a lot of respect for him. I used to be a Mark Andrews fan until today because that was crazy. We're gonna dive into all of that. I'm really excited, man, because there are a lot of notable things. First of all, Emmanuel Forbes had a really good day. He was our best corner out there, point blank, period. Like, out there just being phenomenal against Odell Beckham Jr. a lot of the day as well, but he also covered some other receivers. Our receivers are literally uncoverable, especially when it was one-on-one drills. That was beautiful. Our defensive line was as dominant as expected. Today was just a great day overall. Sam Howell was super on point. But before we dive into all of that, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time immediately that I release these informative and opinionated videos just like this one. I've already uploaded different clips of what happened in practice today, like actual live clips from the Commanders Ravens joint practice. Also, I uploaded a video of Emmanuel Forbes responding and talking about the fight that he had. Make sure you go check those out. And of course, I will be coming with constant live updates on everything that's going on in practice, like this video. So tomorrow's joint practice as well, all the way through training camp. And of course, we will be having a preseason game against the Ravens, which makes things really interesting because we're having these fights with the Ravens, and then we have a preseason game against them on Monday. That's going to be really interesting, and of course, I'll be live streaming that. I'll have a preview out before the game as well, previewing the things you need to watch for the most as a fan, like which particular players or certain things that you really need to key in on while watching that preseason game, the things that you really need to focus on. And of course, I'll also be doing a review for that preseason game as well, breaking down everything that I saw, again, going position group by position group like I do with these training camp breakdowns. And make sure you're still on the lookout for all the rookie film sessions, especially if you're a channel member, because if you're a channel member, you'll get like the full hour-long raw and cut versions, whereas everybody else will get like a quick little synopsis, couple of plays here and there. But man, let's go ahead and get to it, man. I'm sorry for the long intro. Let's get it.
You tell your family you can be a commander.
All right, so first of all, Josh Harris, Mitchell Rales, and Joe Gibbs pulled up to the practice. I thought that was pretty interesting, man. Josh Harris and Mitchell Rales are the most active owners probably out here doing it. At the very least, one of the most. We've never just heard about Dan Snyder just pulling up to practices for no reason. This is like Josh Harris's like 5th practice he's attended that I know of. Mitchell Rales has been there a few times as well. So this is really interesting. Also, before we dive into everything, just to let you know, it was about just an even day. Like when you're trying to discuss about who technically won the practice, it's really hard to tell because both sides of the ball for both teams made great plays. Maybe if you were like keeping a score, maybe we had the very slightest of edges, very maybe, but overall it was dead even. But what's really interesting is that a lot of like Ravens reporters, Ravens players, and coaches have some high praise for a lot of Commanders players. We're going to get into that when we get to their respective position groups, but like most notably like Sam Howell and all of that type of stuff. So I'm really excited to talk about that. But of course, London Fletcher was there as well, and he said, quote, "We matched the intensity of the Baltimore Ravens and in most cases out-physical them. And our offensive line played outstanding. They performed very well as well," unquote. So that's really interesting. Again, we're going to talk about the offensive line when we get there. But overall, London Fletcher felt like you can maybe say most of the day was pretty much even. And then it's hard to, again, like keep score because they're not trying to like score points. But if anything, if you had to take one thing away from this practice, the only edge that either team had is that maybe we were more physical than them. Even though they were the ones starting a lot of these fights, if anything, we were more physical than them, which is really interesting. So I guess if you had to say who won the day, may be us just for that one because that's the only thing separating anything. Like, again, if we're talking about receivers, DBs, offensive line, defensive line, stuff like that, it was generally pretty evenly matched. Like, maybe we edged them in defensive line, but then maybe they edged us in receiver play versus our DB. Like, it's just so minimal as far as the gap goes in most things. The only true thing separating either of us was who was most physical, and it seems like we were that. So I guess kind of we won the day, but again, it's just so close, too close to call. But also really interesting, a Ravens reporter pointed out the fact that on the defensive side of the ball for the Ravens reporter also said that the Ravens in general just weren't able to get much of a pass rush going. Now, they did have one player that went off. We'll talk about that when we get to the offensive line version of this, because Ravens defensive line goes against our Commanders offensive line, so it's best suited to talk about that. Then he basically said the only time that they really got any real consistent pressure of any measure, of any sort of consistency, was when they blitzed. Also, he said that the Ravens didn't allow much downfield, and the run defense was pretty solid, except for a few cases. So that's their point of view on it before we start to dive into every position group and things like that. Now, injury-wise, just an update. Phidarian Mathis was out there, but he didn't do anything. So this is the first time we've actually even seen him at practice in a while. And he was wearing a boot. Do with that as you will. Take whatever from that as you will. Doesn't sound too great, but we'll see. They said that it's not that major, but we'll see. He's wearing a boot. That's really interesting. Also, Chase Young did not participate in drills today, so the Ravens seemed like they had the majority of their starters, and we missed out with guys like Phidarian Mathis, Chase Young, Logan Thomas, and very notable people who we're also going to talk about. Benjamin St-Juste. But again, Chase Young did not participate. He's one of the people that didn't participate. He didn't even do drills today, and so I highly doubt that he's involved tomorrow. So no joint practices for Phidarian Mathis, Chase Young, and a few other people. But Chase Young was dressed at the very least. He was out there, and he didn't have anything particular on, like no boot or nothing, but just didn't participate. Also, tight end Logan Thomas, at the very least, he was working on the side field, so he did even more than Chase Young did, that's a really good step towards progress for him. And then also Benjamin St-Juste didn't do anything. He's still working on an ankle injury. And shouts out to my boys at Ref the District, because I didn't even realize this until they pointed it out. Make sure you follow them on YouTube, follow them on Twitter. Again, Ref the District, REFTHEDISTRICT. He pointed out, he put a clip on Twitter pointing out the fact that a lot of our injuries happened in one play. Literally, Chase Young, Phidarian Mathis, and Benjamin St-Juste got all hurt on the same play. The play where Deshaun Watson escaped that Chase Young sack, where Chase Young had a really good pass rush move. He literally broke it down and paused it and highlighted when the injury happened to each player. The Benjamin St-Juste one is the one that sucks the most, because it's literally the end of the play, whistle already blown, and one of the Commanders players fell on him and kind of hit his ankle in a weird way. So that's crazy that he's hurt from that. You see when Chase Young gets hurt, the moment he gets hurt, the moment Phidarian Mathis get hurt, and the moment that Benjamin St-Juste gets hurt as well. It's so stupid. Again, shouts out to Ref the District for that. Just some severe bad luck. Now we're on to the fights, because I know that's probably the main reason that some of y'all are here. So I didn't want to hold it until the end of the video like some people would probably do. I know a lot of nobody in the Commanders Nation as far as reporters go, but you know how the national media does, like NFL.com and ESPN. A lot of those people will hold the juiciest part and the best part of the video, the most exciting part, the reason people mostly came to the video until the end. I just wanted to go through my normal formalities. Let's get the injuries out the way. Let's get some of the general topics out the way so that you have that in the back of your head when we dive into each position group. But it's time to go ahead and get these fights out the way. First of all, the first fight that happened was between technically Emmanuel Forbes, the cornerback, our rookie corner, who had a great day, versus Baltimore Ravens wide receiver Tylan Wallace. And again, this was the first of several fights. This fight was really interesting because it seemed like Emmanuel Forbes was just doing what he was supposed to do, going for the ball and stuff like that. Tylan Wallace didn't like it. He started punching Emmanuel Forbes, which, let's just go ahead and get this out the way. Punching people with helmets on is very stupid, because if anything, you're doing more damage to yourself. It's really dumb. But the disrespect, you can't stand for that. So I'm really proud and happy that Emmanuel Forbes went right back on him. Not taking nothing. Really tough. I love a corner with some toughness, ready to talk trash, ready to fight back. If you bringing it to me, I'm gonna give it right back tenfold. I appreciate that. Not gonna start it, but we'll finish it. Absolutely love that. Love the fact that he didn't back down, and the fact that this is coming from a rookie. He's showing that he belongs out there on that field against a really good team in the Ravens. I mean, I felt like us as Commanders fans, we know the Commanders have the potential to be a really good team. But if you ask the national media, they think the Ravens are one of the best teams in the NFL. They think the Commanders are one of the worst. So just according to the national media narrative, I mean, it's really interesting that the Commanders are standing up to a Ravens team that, if anything, they're a pinnacle and a great example of consistency and being consistently good to great. They've been great since John Harbaugh's been there for like more than 10 years. So I just feel like it's really cool that we have a rookie coming in like, hey man, whatever them old Commanders was on, we not on that no more. I'm here now type of thing. I love that. But also Devin Duvernay ended up flying in. Laquan Treadwell flew in and started getting some hits in.
Mink was like, oh, he's going deep. I almost said Mark Andrews must be somewhere down there.
We got some punches being thrown.
And then shortly afterwards, the very next snap, you have the Mark Andrews play. And this is the one where I lost a lot of respect for him because Danny Johnson hit Mark Andrews, and I guess Mark Andrews didn't like it. So clearly after the play is over, Danny Johnson minding his business back to Mark Andrews thinking nothing bad happened. Mark Andrews literally picks this guy up and body slam him. You never know if he would have fell on his neck. He would have been paralyzed. You have no idea what could have happened. So I've completely lost all of my respect for Mark Andrews and will be actively rooting against him. Everybody else cool. Even Tylan Wallace, who, you know, hit Emmanuel Forbes, at least that was just like a stupid hit. I'm frustrated from you locking me up and things like that. But like going out of your way after Danny Johnson has his back to you to body slam him like that again, you never know what could have happened. This could have been a way worse situation where Danny Johnson isn't just completely fine afterwards. So but man, I mean, Morgan Moses getting involved. I'm like, where does Morgan Moses even feel like he has the right to get involved in this? First of all, again, most notably the fact that the Ravens started all of these fights. Like, it sounds like all of them were started by the Ravens. And then on top of that, Morgan Moses, like, come on, dog. Like, where do you feel like you get in on this at all? But man, I love the fact that the Commanders rallied behind Danny Johnson. They did not like that body slam at all, and with good reason. Like, there was absolutely no reason for him to end up doing that at all. So, hey man, I'm really glad the Commanders players responded the way they did. I mean, even at a certain point, Deron Payne literally kept asking Mark Andrews, take off your helmet so we can fight for real. Like, go ahead, take that helmet off so we won't look silly. We can have a real fight. And Mark Andrews really much just didn't want any of the smoke. Like, before things were even broken up, Deron Payne was asking Mark Andrews, take your helmet off. Let's shoot the fair one, you know what I'm saying? Run 15 or something. And Mark Andrews was like, nah, I'm good, man. I got my free body slam in there. Completely blindsided him, and then I'm just going to run off and avoid any further confrontation once things are in an even playing field. Again, lost all respect for Mark Andrews, man. I used to like him. I probably won't even draft him in fantasy right now because I got to root against him actively. So now how I'm going to have him on my fantasy team hoping he performs well and I'm rooting against him? Those goals don't align anymore. It's politics now, man. It's off the field stuff now when it come to him. So yeah, I don't like that because like fighting, cool. Again, the Emmanuel Forbes, Tylan Wallace one, I think it's stupid, but at the end of the day, nobody was hurt. Nobody was potentially hurt at the very least. It wasn't anything that serious. A lot of shoving, maybe some punches thrown. But again, if you're throwing a punch at a helmet, you look stupid. And if anything, you're hurting yourself more than you're hurting the player that you're throwing a punch at. But the Mark Andrews thing is a completely different situation. So it's just like, come on. Even if you felt like Danny Johnson, that was like not a hit that you deemed appropriate. Which I mean, looking at the clip, I don't feel like it was that bad, honestly. But even so, talk to him afterwards. Or at the very least, hold him and talk to him. You can show that you're angry, but don't from behind body slam the guy, almost like killing him or paralyzing him. And again, shouts out to the whole Commanders team, most notably Deron Payne, that was like, all right, you want to do that? How about, yeah, you want to body slam him? Body slam me. How about that? Body slam me. Let's try that. And again, Mark Andrews didn't want none of the smoke. Then moving on, there was another incident where Ravens defensive back Ardarius Washington caused some benches to clear after he had a very aggressive tackle on Cole Turner. So it was just getting really heated at a certain point. It was just things constantly happening on both sides. And Terry McLaurin didn't like that at all. Now, that was the moment where Terry McLaurin stood up and was very livid. Ron Rivera had to break it up. And I love the fact that like that energy motivated the Commanders. If anything, they didn't become distracted. They didn't get out of their element. They didn't get out of their game. If anything, they started to perform better after these incidents happened. Because at a certain point, Sam Howell threw a really good pass to Jahan Dotson. He made a great catch, and Terry McLaurin was the first to greet him and get extremely hype. It was after the play where he was livid, and he was like, "That's all day. That's too easy." Talking trash to the Ravens, like, "All right, y'all want to play dirty instead of doing extracurriculars? We're just gonna prove it onto the field." And the Commanders definitely stepped it up in intensity, and that's when we really started to ball out against the Ravens. After the Ravens started having all those extracurriculars, all of the fighting, all of the tempers flaring and stuff like that, again, the Commanders kept their composure, which I love. They defended themselves when they were supposed to actively during the fights, but then after the fight was over, they were back to business and then just carving up the Ravens defense, which I absolutely love. Jahan Dotson basically went and got it back in blood for Danny Johnson, technically. And again, I'm gonna keep reminding y'all, Mark Andrews didn't want no problems with Daron Payne. Rightfully so, though. And then also there was a weird situation. I don't know if this was a whole fight, but the Ravens defensive lineman Odafe Owe hooked center Nick Gates around the back of the neck and got a couple of pops in on his face mask, and Gates threw a couple of punches back, and then it got broken up quickly. I don't know if that incident was part of another one of the previous 3 incidents or if that was completely separate on his own. I don't know. I'm just trying to give y'all all of the information I can from everything I'm receiving, because again, I wasn't there. And then also some joint practice notes. Of course, Grant Paulson, I felt like he put it very well on Twitter. Joint practices are hugely important, more helpful than a preseason game. But this is the issue. There are almost always brawls because there are no ramifications for acting a fool. This is why joint practices haven't become even more prevalent amongst the NFL. And I completely agree. Again, I agree with him that joint practices are very important. But again, like I said in my previous video, this is not an NFL sanctioned, NFL ran, NFL organized event. This is literally just the Commanders and the Ravens coming together to have some practices together. The NFL does not oversee this. The NFL, the NFLPA, Roger Goodell, nobody's overseeing this. There's no exact rules in place. There's no fine set up just in case things get out of hand, because Mark Andrews would have been fined and more than likely even suspended for the body slam that he did on Danny Johnson. So it's kind of anarchy out there. It's kind of like a sense of just chaos and no real control. But we're going to talk about a little bit control when we get to the coaching part, because Eric Bieniemy got some things situated, man. That boy sounded like a mob boss at one point in time in practice when he broke up a fight. We'll get to it. But even including with the joint practices, John Harbaugh spoke on it and basically said that, yeah, things got heated, but overall it was a great practice for both teams, and I agree. Minus the Mark Andrews body slam, I felt like even with the fighting included, this was a very productive practice and like something that you just can't measure. Like this is an irreplaceable practice that you can't simulate in any other way. These joint practices, these 2 practices against the Ravens are probably going to be more impactful and more critical to the success of this team going into the regular season than like a whole 2 weeks of practices of us practicing amongst ourselves. Like that's how impactful these practices are. Again, a lot of people feel like these practices are even more important than the preseason game coming up. So again, even with the fighting included, these practices were big time for us. Then Terry McLaurin, while addressing the media, said that he had fun competing against a different team. It's a good measuring stick for where he and the rest of the offense is at. And that's a great point, man. That's really big. This is a measuring stick. Like I already said earlier, the Ravens are a great example of consistent greatness. They're always good, and going into this season, people are expecting them to be even better and to be a strong playoff contender, maybe even a Super Bowl contender. And being able to practice against them for 2 days straight and then have a preseason game days later is huge. And then on top of that, the fact that if anything, we were at worst case scenario, we were even with those guys. So if you consider the Ravens a playoff contender and a potential Super Bowl contender, what does that make us? If anything, the only difference between the 2 teams, like I said earlier, was that we were more physical than them. But as far as speed, explosion, offense, defense, whatever, we were pretty much even with them. Offensive line, defensive line, any way you want to look at it. Also, Daron Payne said in his press conference that it's always fun to go against new guys and new techniques, he said. Added that the practices feel like an extra preseason work. The reps I feel like are game speed. And I completely agree. And the thing I mostly take from that is not only are the Ravens a great measuring stick, but again, just by playing a different team that you don't play against all the time, now you're going against different players that have different ways of doing things, different levels of talent, different techniques, like he said. So it's kind of interesting, like as a defensive tackle, rather than going against, Nick Gates, Chris Paul, Samuel Cosme, and Sadiq Charles every day. Now you're going against another set of interior offensive linemen. So now maybe your pass rush moves that work on those guys don't work on these guys. So now you need to develop a new one. Now you need a new rush plan. Now you need to think a little bit harder. You need to challenge yourself. So that's making everybody better. At the end of these joint practices and this preseason game that we're going to have against the Ravens, both of our teams will be better. This is not just simply the Commanders are becoming a better team. The Ravens have to deal with our defensive line, deal with our secondary, deal with our receivers, deal with Sam Howell, deal with our coaching staff, most notably Eric Bieniemy. So they're going to be better at the end of all of this as well. And again, just little things like different techniques that guys use, like as a DB and Emmanuel Forbes, instead of going against Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, the way they run routes, the way that Odell Beckham Jr. runs routes is different. So I just feel like this was a very productive joint practice. I hope we do this every year with somebody, preferably the Ravens, because I feel like they're always going to consistently be good. And also, they're very close. The players don't have to get on a plane to go to these practices. So I just feel like it's a win-win. I feel like we should just have this set up and scheduled every year. Also, again, like I already said earlier, man, with how heated these joint practices were, how competitive they were, and how much better we all are from it, this preseason game is going to be really exciting, especially while the starters are out there. Man, I can't wait to live stream that. Now moving on, talking about the coaches. Like I said earlier, Terry McLaurin at one point was just balling out of control, and even a Ravens reporter pointed it out. He said, quote, Terry McLaurin is that dude. He runs hard and the enthusiasm runs through the team, unquote. And then the reporter also said that the Ravens kind of hit practice slowly, where the Commanders were ready to go from the start. So that's why I'm talking about this in the coaching section, because it sounds like the Commanders came a little bit more prepared for this practice than the Ravens did. We already talked about how the Commanders, if anything, were more physical than the Ravens overall. And then on top of that, coming from a Ravens reporter that felt like the Commanders came a little bit more prepared. And then on top of that, also the fights, we were the more mature team, that the Ravens were starting it and we were finishing it. I just love the poise that we showed. Again, if you had to say one team won, you could probably side with us, because even Ravens reporters would agree. Also, again, like I mentioned earlier, I foreshadowed, at a certain point, Eric Bieniemy sounded like a mob boss, like literally just came in and just shut everything down. Nobody else could break up the fight, and then Eric Bieniemy came in and everything stopped immediately, like everybody was afraid of him or something. Like at one point, when it was the Cole Turner incident where the defensive back Ardarius Washington hit him and Terry McLaurin got mad, Eric Bieniemy came in and broke everything up, screamed at everybody, and even the Ravens side, everybody just parted ways and was like, yeah, we tripping, we sorry, don't hurt us type of thing. So I just love how the Eric Bieniemy legend lives on. The next up, quarterback, and we're only going to talk about Sam Howell because that was the most notable thing that came from practice as far as the quarterback room concerns us. I mean, Jacoby Brissett had a pretty decent day, and I don't even know about Jake Fromm. Nobody discussed, talked about, or even showed clips of Jake Fromm, so I have no idea with him. I'm going to be completely honest. But Sam Howell, man, had a really good day today. Terry McLaurin after practice said that Sam Howell did a great job of improving and had been working on his timing with the receivers, and it shows, man. They were clicking on all cylinders. Even Ravens cornerback Marlon Humphrey, one of the best corners in the NFL, when talking about Sam Howell, said, quote, he looked really comfortable, unquote. And that's, man, that's one of the best words you can use to describe a quarterback. I mean, there's a lot of positive traits a quarterback can have, but comfortable, especially as a guy that's only had one NFL start so far in his career, is big time. I mean, he's technically like a redshirt freshman, a redshirt rookie. For him to be comfortable is huge praise coming from an opposing cornerback, especially one at the high caliber of a Marlon Humphrey. Also, another Ravens reporter has some positive things to say about the Commanders. He said that Sam Howell looked good out there, and that he had Sam Howell 12 of 15 in in 11-on-11's work, with most of his throws being short to intermediate. Again, this is the same reporter from earlier that said that the Ravens did everything they could to not allow anything deep. So I like the fact that Sam Howell was like, all right, bet, I'm gonna hit everything short and intermediate. You're not gonna be able to cover it because you're focused on stopping anything deep happening. Our offensive line had a really good day today, probably their best day of the off season so far. So they weren't able to get a lot of pressure on him. So he was able to dice up the Ravens today in 11-on-11s, and reportedly went 12-15 according to a Ravens reporter. Also, Ron Rivera, after practice, was very pleased with how the offense looked and praised Sam Howell specifically for how he handled himself under center today. He said there were times early in practice where he wanted Howell to go through his progressions to get the ball out quicker, but for the most part, he thought Howell made some great decisions. Quote, I really liked the way the offensive tempo was. I thought the upbeat practice was what we needed to do, especially against a good team like Baltimore, unquote. A lot of praise from Sam Howell there. Also, Terry McLaurin has some more praise for Sam Howell, even outside of the one that I already gave you. He said that he loves the relationship that he's building with Sam Howell. He said, quote, he's really poised, man. I think he sees the field really well, and he's going to give us the chance to make opportunities on the perimeter, which has been great. His timing was really good with us today. As soon as we were getting out on our breaks, the ball was right there. And he gave us a chance to run with it as well. I think he did a great job. Even when he had to improvise and roll out a little bit, he still kept his eyes downfield, unquote. There were so many parts of that we could break down for like 20 minutes of why specific key words that Terry McLaurin used are very high praise for Sam Howell. But just know, Sam Howell basically balled out today. And then my conclusion from all of this is the fact that if Sam Howell just had a decent day, I would be very proud of him. This is a very good Ravens team. This is his first real action against another defense, another starting defense, really outside of the Cowboys game, week 18 last year. The Browns starters that didn't even include Myles Garrett and some notable players for a quarter and kinda a half, and then now this joint practice against the Ravens. That's his only experience against a starting defense outside of the Commanders. So if he was even just decent today, I would have been really proud of him. So the fact that he went out there and balled out has me extremely optimistic. I'm not gonna lie. This Sam Howell stock just keeps rising and rising and rising. I'm even more optimistic about Sam Howell's potential for this team and leading us to wins, leading us to the playoffs, and maybe even potentially a Super Bowl after today than I even was leaving that Browns preseason game. Like, I'm telling you, man, I'm very proud of Sam Howell for what he did today. Running back wise, man, hey, man, y'all better stop playing with Antonio Gibson. People keep acting like he's just this finesse guy that's just going to be used as a receiver out of the backfield, maybe even line up out wider in the slot and stuff like that. I don't think people still understand that this guy is extremely strong and literally built like Brian Robinson, but happens to run a sub 4.4, 4.3 something in the 40. But he was extremely physical today, breaking tackles, all kinds of stuff. He even had one play where he literally trucked somebody. The defender fell on his back, and then Gibson kept bouncing off, breaking more tackles, kept it going and stuff like that. Matter of fact, if you want to see the play, here it is right here, man. That man Antonio Gibson is not playing with y'all. Stop doubting my boy Antonio Gibson. Also, stop calling him Gibby. He already said that himself in a video that I uploaded a few days ago. But yeah, man, Antonio Gibson, stop acting like he's just this finesse receiver, man. This man is a true running back that can run people over, as you can clearly see by evidence from a really good Ravens defense. Also, moving on to the receivers. Whoo-wee, them top three guys, Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, and Curtis Samuel, literally uncoverable in one-on-one drills. Uncoverable. Just getting ridiculous space with route running. It was just too easy for those guys. That was beautiful to see. Every one-on-one drill I saw from those guys was just excellent. Matter of fact, if you want to see them, here you go. I mean, at one point, Terry McLaurin even shook Marlon Humphrey out of his socks, like completely had the guy laying down one hand on the ground as if he was like an edge rusher before the ball was snapped. Like, had that man out there break dancing. And then Terry McLaurin was even drawing flags and still making catches after the flag, after pass interferences. Terry McLaurin had a crazy day. Again, Jahan Dotson and Curtis Samuel had great days. But even on top of that, Terry McLaurin, I loved how energetic and passionate he was today. Again, with all of the confrontations and tempers flared, and again, the Ravens started most, if not all, of the confrontations that happened today, which fired Terry McLaurin up. And then at a certain point, he had a reception and then did his thing, his little celebration. And then he had another one from Sam Howell, and then he yelled, F no. Like, basically, y'all can't cover me. Like, he was super hyped. He was talking his trash on the field. He was talking his trash from the sideline. Like, again, one of them Jahan Dotson catches, Terry McLaurin was the first to be loud and up in Jahan Dotson's face and yelling at the Ravens defense that's too easy all day type of stuff. We can do this whenever we want. You can't cover us. And there was even this moment right here where things got chippy. You can see Terry McLaurin, one of the ones on the front lines. And then again, Jahan Dotson had a great day, including that catch where Terry McLaurin was really hype. He was killing people on one-on-ones. Nobody could cover him. And then there was even a play where Marlon Humphrey almost had a pick, and Jahan Dotson still went up and made the catch. I mean, I don't know if it was really just a bad ball from Sam Howell and Jahan Dotson bailed him out. But either way, man, ridiculous. And at that point in practice, Sam Howell only had one incompletion. And again, I think he finished with only 3 of them. So that was really interesting. Also, some random news that doesn't even necessarily deal with today. This may have been something from like the previous few days, maybe yesterday's practice, but it's being reported again. It's being re-reported because I've already talked about this, but Mitchell Tinsley has really just been running with the 2s and even at times with the 1s. So again, just take that information, do with it as you will. But I'm really intrigued by the fact that Mitchell Tinsley has an honest chance as an undrafted free agent to make this 53-man roster. I mean, it's a very real chance. So his only problem is that he doesn't do returning. He doesn't do anything return-wise. And then tight end-wise, nothing really noteworthy other than the fact that Cole Turner, with our Darius Washington hitting him, was the reason that Terry McLaurin got ignited, why this team got ignited. They got ignited for a lot of different reasons and situations, but that was the one that had Terry McLaurin going and really made him step up his trash talking and stuff like that. That was the only real notable news from the tight ends. I didn't hear about any catches or any plays those guys made. But so I'm sorry about that. That's all I got from them, from everywhere I could look. Then offensive line wise, Rivera thought that the offensive line played very stout at times. Would like to see some things cleaned up, but there were a lot of positives from today. And again, you can argue the offensive line had their best day today. Another Ravens reporter said, quote, they look clean and they looked good, unquote. So high praise for the Commanders offensive line from an opposing team's reporters. And then Sadiq Charles had a great day, arguably his best day of practice we've ever seen as a burgundy and gold nation. Redskins, Washington football team, Commanders, no matter the name, this is probably the best practice we've ever seen from Sadiq Charles. So you can kind of see why the coaching staff is really pushing for him to be the starter. Even though Chris Paul had a really good day today as well, Sadiq Charles had a fantastic day. So when healthy, you can see why the Commanders are really fighting for him to be the starting left guard. But again, I feel like it's a trap. I'm really worried about. It's not the talent. I've keep saying it. It's never been about the talent for Sadiq Charles. The problem is, can he stay healthy? But again, Chris Paul had a great day. So it seems like when in doubt, if Sadiq Charles were to end up getting healthy, because I'm not dependent on him to stay healthy for an entire season at all. I mean, I wouldn't put I wouldn't even put $50 on Sadiq Charles being able to start every game for the season. So I feel like at some point Chris Paul's going to end up starting. So that my logic is, why not just go ahead and start him now and name him the starter now so he can go ahead and get those starting level reps in the training camp. So by the time we hit the regular season, he's fully prepared. But either way, Sadiq Charles looked great out there. So I guess they're just going to keep trying it with him. I'm not surprised. The only negative to the offensive line today was again that Odafe Owe had a pretty good day today. Like, he had a few pressures that a couple of them you could probably even be considered sacks. So that was the only guy that this offensive line kind of struggled with. Everything else, they were completely clean, and again, arguably had their best practice of all of offseason, which I'm not surprised by because the Ravens defensive line is good. But again, I feel like the Commanders have the best defensive line in football. So, like I said, iron sharpens iron. Emmanuel Forbes going against Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson and Curtis Samuel, De'Ami Brown every day. When you go against other teams' receivers, you're going to be like, wow, this is actually surprisingly a little bit easier. Like, practice is going to be harder than actual games because of how talented certain groups we have on this team, like defensive line. The offensive line going against the best defensive line in football every day. We go against the Ravens defensive line, and they're like, wow, like, this is way easier than I expected coming out here today. I don't think it's a coincidence that they had their best day of practice when they go against a defensive line that isn't filled with Montez Sweat, Chase Young, Deron Payne, and Jonathan Allen. I don't feel like it's any coincidence at all. Speaking of Deron Payne, he had a really good day today, including some one-on-one reps. He had a ridiculous rep against somebody, and it's really rare that you see him do like a side swipe. So that was really interesting. Here's the clip right here.
Set. White 30. White 30, set up. There it is.
I mean, he killed Buddy. I mean, he would have been at the quarterback's face in less than 2 seconds. That would have definitely been a sack in a real game scenario. That was really dominant by him. So he was out there making Mark Andrews crawl into a corner and also beating up on offensive linemen all day. Deron Payne, definitely one of the MVPs of today for, if anything, the way that he punked Mark Andrews. Also, speaking of punking Mark Andrews, well, not necessarily somebody punking him, but moving on to the linebacker group, Jamin Davis had a really good hit on him. And I don't know if this was before Mark Andrews was frustrated and what led to like add it was part of the build up to him becoming frustrated, or if it was afterwards and Jamin Davis was just getting a little bit revenge on him. But here's the clip right here.
We have first team offense out there right now.
Oh,
Wow.
oh.
And then also, Deshaun Harris, the linebacker, had a really good day. Made some really good plays in run defense today against the Ravens defense. Something very noteworthy. If you show up in preseason games like he did against the Browns, you show up in these joint practices when the competition is at its highest, when the stakes are at the highest, when the lights are at their brightest, that's very noteworthy. And Deshaun Harris has been putting together a pretty good week of football. So I'm really excited about him, and he's increasing his chances of potentially making his 53-man roster somehow. Now the DB group, very pleased with what I saw from Emmanuel Forbes. All of this talk, I mean, we saw in the Browns game he can make plays against the run, and then we saw against the Ravens that he can stick with any receiver. He locked up Odell Beckham Jr. on some plays, even if it was another receiver locked him up. I mean, again, the reason he ended up in the fight was the fact that he was locking up other receivers, and that receiver got mad. So it was just like he just had people frustrated out there today. If people aren't mad at you, people not hating on you, you're not doing something right. And the fact that Emmanuel Forbes was so heavily involved in a lot of stuff shows that he was just frustrating people, which shows he was locking people up and doing his thing. He had a very productive day today. Was easily our best looking corner. Again, Benjamin St. Juste didn't participate today, and Kendall Fuller was getting cooked. We'll talk about that soon. But Emmanuel Forbes was balling, man. And Odell Beckham Jr. is a very underratedly physical wide receiver, and Emmanuel Forbes stuck with him. So it's not just speed, it's also weight and strength. I feel like it's time to set those rumors about him not being ready for the NFL level aside. First of all, he's coming from the SEC, so I felt like we should already know him from there, but he's proven it in the way that he made that run stop against the Browns and the way that he stacked up against a really physical receiver in Odell today, man. And I mean, here's one of the clips right here. And what's really interesting about that play is that he has this knack for being able to like make great pass breakups even if he doesn't get his head turned around. Of course, as a cornerback, you hope to get your head turned around every time. That's the ideal situation. But even when he doesn't, he's able to read the hands of the receiver and get his hands up just in time to break it up. And that's literally what he did on that clip that I just showed you. That's just one of those secret weapon traits that he has in his arsenal on his utility belt that most corners don't have. So that's just another thing that Emmanuel Forbes does really well. And thank goodness that he does. And then again, even not even covering Odell Beckham Jr., he was locking people up. And then, like I said, Kendall Fuller was out there getting cooked. Here's him getting cooked by the same receiver, Odell Beckham Jr., that Emmanuel Forbes did a great job locking up against. Here's Kendall Fuller getting beat deep by the same receiver, Odell Beckham Jr.
So just real quick here, now we're back to 11-on-11 work here, so we can see some of that competition in the trenches, and now they're airing it out down the field. Ooh. And big play to Odell Beckham down the field.
And also, I mean, our DB group struggled with a few people, like Mark Andrews. He just had some really good plays against us, most notably this play against Cameron Curl. Here's the clip right here.
Nice step up. Always going deep.
Oh, he made the catch.
Mark.
No.
Yep.
Andrew.
And I'm not even mad at that, man. That was pretty good coverage by Cameron Crowe. That was just a really good throw and a really good catch. Again, great offense always beats great defense. That's literally how the NFL is set up. The rules and everything, the way the game is set up is for the offense to beat the defense. And so that was great coverage from Cam Crowe. But at the end of the day, what can you really do? Mark Andrews, even though I'm rooting against him, is still a really good tight end. You can't deny that. Also, Quan Martin and Jace Whitaker had some really good pass breakups today as well. That's really good, especially for Quan Martin to bounce back that way. I'm not worried about Quan Martin at all, but I'm still happy to hear that he's making plays against the Ravens. And then Percy Butler, man, showed some of that 4-3 speed, because at one point he ran down Keaton Mitchell, who runs a 4-3. So that means Percy Butler was probably running a 4-2 something on that play, like completely hawked him down on that play. Keaton Mitchell was ahead of everybody, and Percy Butler literally tracked him down, ran him down to get, just like how DK Metcalf did that one time the ball was intercepted against whatever team that was. And then also Zay Flowers, our DB group basically did well against everybody except for Odell Beckham Jr. killed Kendall Fuller. Kendall Fuller was kind of cook food for quite a bit of the time today. But Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews were the MVPs from the Ravens offense today. Just to go ahead and let you know that now. I know we're mostly talking about the Commanders, but I just felt like that was a good time to mention that. Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews, if there were any notable winners from the Ravens side today, it was those two. Other than that, I feel like the Commanders defense had a really good day against them. And then no real special teams news. I feel like everything was just team drills and individual drills. I don't think there were any like Casimir Allen fielding punts things. But again, I still feel like Casimir Allen's probably already our starting punt returner. So that's all I got for you. But no new information that came out today. And then, yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. And I really appreciate y'all. Shouts out to all of my supporters, especially my sponsors, my Pro Bowl sponsors, whose name you see scrolling on the screen right now. Man, let me know in the comment section how you feel about these fights, how you feel about our receiving group going crazy, our defense going crazy. Overall, let's be a more physical, more well-prepared, and be a more mature and more composed and poised than the Ravens were today. How you feel about all of that? Emmanuel Forbes locking up pretty much everybody he went against for the most part today. All of that. Our offensive line having the best day of practice they've had all offseason. Is it just as obvious? Like, I think that the fact that they finally are not going against the Commanders defensive line, which is the best in football, so of course they had their best day today. Also, Sadiq Charles was healthy and he had his best day of practice arguably in his burgundy and gold career so far. Let me know how you feel about all of that and anything else that I may not have mentioned in the video. And of course, again, like I said, let me know how you feel about the fights and the fact that the Commanders didn't start any of them, it seemed like, but it seemed like they finished most of, if not all of them. That's really notable. And yeah, man, I'm gonna catch y'all later. Appreciate y'all. I'm out.